Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Unparalleled Oscar Duo. I'm Nick. This is Shane. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Shane, it's been 2 years.
Yes, it has been 2 years. It's very nice to get off this hiatus, get back into the swing of things. We're not quite where we want to be yet, being coming off a pandemic era, but we'll take it. I'm very happy to be here, Nick. Thanks for coordinating this.
You know,
Um,
I live in Shane, and I didn't realize how much I did until we sort of put this together the past couple of months and I started watching these movies. So it feels very good, feels normal to be talking to you again. It's also exciting because, Shane, you've been doing a little thing called being a top movie critic for a little magazine called Revamp. Tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
so with Revamp, my cousin Owen James Vincent is a British celebrity photographer. So he started an online magazine, and basically he's developed a lot of connections and has really started gaining momentum with getting some up and coming talents to the industry. So I have actually created a section in that magazine called Revamp the Inner Screen, where I conduct some movie reviews, and basically that it's essentially more or less we do those reviews, and then also we have interviews that we do. So I myself have conducted a couple of interviews, and essentially what I've had is, I'm sorry.
What was your latest review? I saw you had one out today.
So I did one on Halo, the TV show that just aired today. So there's a TV series based on the popular video game. So I interviewed the actor Ryan McParland. It was a really great opportunity to sit down with this actor and kind of just really sort of get to know some of these up and comings and sort of their goals, their passions. So it's been good. It's been really good so far. Yeah. And we're hoping to get this video on there, and keep the ball rolling with new talent.
Absolutely. So you guys can go and check out Revamp online and check out some of Shane's articles already. And then, like Shane just said, we're going to be a simulcast, or what's it, syndicated. You guys who are watching tonight can watch all over again, hopefully as of maybe at the earliest Saturday. So
right.
We have some movies to talk about. 2022 Best Picture. Got 10 nominees. I think what we're going to do is we'll go through. I'm just going to list the names of the movies, and then we'll come right back around, and you'll get a little bit of our thoughts on the movies. First, we're starting with Power of the Dog.
Yep.
Benedict Cumberbatch. Don't Look Up. West Side Story. Belfast. Dune. Coda. King Richard. Nightmare Alley, Drive My Car, and Licorice Pizza.
Great.
So those are the 10 movies. Just a quick note up front, Shane, if you'll allow me. I did a little bit of math yesterday. Not my strongest suit, but I was curious to know what the average length of these movies were. I mean, certainly not new to the Best Picture category that these movies are very long, but the average length of these movies, and there's one we'll talk about, Drive My Car, that was just under 3 hours. 2 hours and 18 minutes. Pretty a bit of a daunting task at times to get through some of these movies, Shane.
Yep, it is. With these films, a lot of them were lengthier than the average that we've seen in the past, and some better, some for the better, some for worse, which I think we'll go through for each movie. But it is an unfortunate. I mean, well, I mean, depending on the film, it can be an unfortunate trend. Again, some films they use it, and that length of time to tell a really bloated story. Others others really develop sort of a more of an epic storyline that really does engage you for consistently for those 3 or plus hours or however long. But they, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
only too long, it's not good, and it doesn't work. I mean, so with that, let's start with Power of the Dog. Power of the Dog on Netflix is a Western psychological drama starring Benedict Cumberbatch, Kirsten Dunst, Jesse Clemens, and Cody Smith McPhee. Cumberbatch and Clemens play brothers. They're also wealthy 1920s ranchers. I believe it takes place in Montana. Clemens falls in love with a widow played by Dunst, and Dunst and her son move into the family ranch. And from there, in my eyes, weirdness sort of ensues. I wasn't a huge fan of this one, Shane, but I know you feel completely the opposite. So,
yeah.
what were your thoughts here?
So, this film, the cinematography was just masterfully done. Really captures that Western setting during the 1920s era. And what I really liked about this film was the soundtrack. It was very minimalist, but when you did hear the soundtrack, it was delivered with precision. It really emphasized those suspenseful moments. And I think it really contributed to emphasizing the slow escalation and that slow burn we're seeing in this movie. The thing that was most interesting about this movie was that how sort of the storytelling is somewhat subtle, implied. You know, by the end of the story, you can gather that Peter intentionally kills Phil via the rope. However, there are a couple of people, including myself, not right away catching that. Because that's the way the story is told is delivered in a subtle way. We're seeing subtle clues to this. And you can easily take this film and interpret it through a completely different lens. One of which is simply a budding love story between Phil and Peter that just had a tragic turn. He just got sick and he passed away. Really not knowing what happened unless you picked up on those subtle clues about the disease and how he effectively used Peter used his medical skills to orchestrate a calculated murder.
Right. Yeah, I think Shane, I think we're far off on this one in the sense that exactly what you liked about it was what I didn't like. I mean,
Mhm.
I totally respect what you're saying about the soundtrack, and it was subtle and it was well timed and it was never the sort of overwhelming, but just sort of this perfect spot that it was. But it also meant that this movie meandered. Wasn't too long in time, in 2 hours, a little over 2 hours, but it sort of meandered in these long, drawn out scenes that I think are meant to celebrate the cinematography. You take away from me really being invested in a story that's being told. Again, where that cinematography, I think some people see as a plus, I don't, necessarily see as being a good thing. I also feel like a lot could have been done, and this is an easy criticism, but I feel it. Um, this was an interesting world. They're 1920s ranchers in Montana. There's a lot that could be very interesting about that, and
Mhm.
world that could be created. I don't even need to be interested in that in particular, to be curious. And I don't feel like that was created. I mean, that's really where the movie I could have gotten over what I thought was a little bit of a lack of a storyline,
Mhm,
in exchange for the world that they
mhm,
created. So, in the end, that's sort of where I come down on it. I thought it was drawn out. I thought it was long. I thought it was weird and
mhm,
and I didn't know what was going on at times.
mhm.
He played a good weird guy, but I wanted more on him. You learn that
Yeah.
he went to Yale and somehow ended up being this weird, disheveled, but somewhat
Mhm.
there's not enough there behind that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, it kind of dips its toe in terms of exploring his sexuality. You pick up on those subtle clues that he is homosexual. The way he talks about his friend Bronco Henry, the playbills that Peter finds in the woods. So it all kind of a lot of the way this, as I said earlier, a lot of the way the story in this film is told it's all implied. Um, I think it's clever storytelling, and I think that's why this film is, nominated for so many nominated in so many Oscar categories, because it really, you really see the quality and the cinematography, the music, the performances. It's all there, and the story, love it or hate it. I think it did something different, and something unique.
Yeah, no, and I mean, they did something right, obviously, because I think up until a week or two ago, I mean, a lot of people thought this was going to be the Best Picture winner.
Mhm,
We might have different thoughts on that. We'll get
mhm,
to that here shortly. Uh,
mhm,
let's go to Don't Look Up. As I look up, Don't Look Up. Adam McKay, his latest, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, Meryl Streep. Another sort of satire on politics and the pandemic. DiCaprio and Lawrence play academics who discover an asteroid headed straight towards Earth. Despite all the clear evidence, of course, the president, played by Streep, her son, Jonah Hill, refused to accept the clear science on it. That's essentially the premise of the movie, and these astronomers try to save the world, but nobody's listening. Uh,
mhm,
actually. On my end, Shane, you know, neither of us are big fans of this movie, and neither of us were big fans of Vice,
mhm. Yeah.
one about Dick Cheney. I mean, it has its moments at time, but I think mostly we're on the same page. Shane, what are
Yeah.
your?
So yeah, I mean, I think we can both agree that this film once again suffers from McKay's pattern of just delivering a political message at the expense of its story. And that's the bottom line. Um, it's obviously this film is a meditation on coronavirus, the political divide it has created. Um, and But you see those sacrifices in the storytelling really come through, especially when, I think the most jarring moment for me in the film was when there was this twist where DiCaprio's character ends up, hooking up with Kate Blanchett. And, you're the message is, he's, not a person of integrity, by doing that, but you didn't really know him that well to begin with. So, I think the feeling the film was trying to elicit from you just doesn't happen. Um, and that is just poor storytelling, poor character development. I think what Adam McKay is also good at doing is delivering that political message in very tongue-in-cheek manners, using great humor. Um, I think the humor and sort of those tongue-in-cheek moments are probably the strongest aspects of this film, and ultimately what make it watchable and engaging. But beyond that, I mean, very weak storytelling. Certainly not, certainly not a Best Picture nominee for me. I think that we're just kind of seeing the same pattern of film from his formula.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail right on the head, Shane. I mean,
Mhm.
the only thing I would add is, on top of it's preachy, it's obvious, it's obnoxious at times. McKay really indulges himself in this sort of style where, exactly as you said, I mean, you sacrifice the story to make a point.
Yep.
Uh, you know, the only other point I would make, and I really thought that the humor, I mean, a couple times I laughed, but it's very elementary. There's nothing really clever about it at all. It's all very low hanging
Mhm.
goes after. The other big point I'll make on this one is just the waste of talent. I mean, you've got DiCaprio, you've got Jennifer Lawrence, Meryl Streep,
Mhm.
movie Mark Rylance, who I've come to really like. Uh,
Yep. It's great.
and and of course you had Christian Bale, one of the greatest actors in the world, invest himself in the Cheney character a few years ago. So some of the best and the brightest, and they're drawn to these movies because of McKay's success. I don't think they're good movies, and I don't think that, even if they're trying to forward a worthy message, that the quality of the movie should suffer for it. Uh,
Yep.
so and it's just it's too much. Honestly, it's too much to watch. When it first started, I thought maybe it had a spark. I guess I'll buy into any asteroid movie. I am. I'll admit it. I'm a tremendous Armageddon fan. So I was ready
Same
to
here. Same here. Guilty pleasure.
asteroid movie, but yeah, then it got out of hand. Uh, so yeah, I mean that's where I'm at on that, Shane. Do you have any other thoughts? We move on to West Side Story.
Oh, we can move right on. Sounds good to me.
Let's go to West Side Story, Spielberg remake, 1961 Romeo and Juliet inspired musical, centers around rival gangs, the Jets, who are white, and the Puerto Rican Sharks. Jet falls in love with a shark, but the social distinctions are too much for love to overcome. I don't have a lot to say about this one. I wasn't terribly impressed by it, Shane. I think that we largely come down on the same column on this one.
Yeah, I agree. And, I have a lot to say just about this genre. So, I will say this, the film, the cinematography was excellent. It really creates some thrilling moments. You really kind of see the camera dance in rhythm with the choreography in a way where it just has very precision timing. So all those aspects of it were of the best quality. The costume design, the choreography, you wouldn't expect any less from Spielberg for all those just technical areas of the film. Um, the main issue for me is just my sort of generalization of the musicals, and what I find to be the biggest struggle for a musical is um, a film that is a musical. It simply as a concept, it does not work for me. Um, you know, I think film and music as separate entities can tell very good stories, can really elicit emotion from the person either listening to a song, watching a film. Um, when you attempt to combine these two concepts in this way, it just falls apart for me. Because you could have a moment where characters are sharing a poignant, intimate moment. Maybe it's a little dark, a little dramatic, and then that ends up being shattered by a song because they just break out and start dancing. And there's just this feeling of awkwardness. That transition just doesn't work for me. It never has. Like I said, I think songs and film can do those things and achieve those things independently. But when we try to blend them in this manner, it doesn't work.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I'm mostly there with you, Shane. I certainly wouldn't write off musicals entirely. There's a lot of older musicals that I'm quite a fan of. La La Land was a recent one that I liked. I think that you liked it too. But I will admit that it's a really difficult balance to strike when making a musical, which is I think what you're
it
saying.
is.
You
Yep.
you simultaneously have to um, create a create a situation where we accept the fact that you break out into group song every
Hmm.
so.
Yeah.
And make that either whimsical enough or real enough or whatever. I mean, there isn't an exact formula, but there is a balance that you need to strike. And
Yeah. There is.
I think here in this movie, it wasn't there. Perhaps Spielberg took for granted how well known the first one was.
Hmm. Hmm.
Really, it didn't do it for me. You know,
Yeah.
and, I will add again another very long film. Over 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
I
That
think
it was.
with the
Um, yeah, I mean, I think in a nutshell, I mean, the only other thing I would note about this film was I think the performances from Ansel Elgort and Rachel Zegler were sincere. They were earnest. Their heart, it was clear their heart was in it. Um, and yeah, I think that was just a strong component of the film.
yeah,
The performances were there.
there was talent all over the screen. There's no doubt about
Yes,
it. Just
absolutely. Yep.
so I mean, yeah, let's go into Belfast.
All right.
Belfast, sort of an early darling, I think, headed into the Oscars. A film that follows a Protestant family in Belfast during what's referred to as the Troubles,
Hmm.
Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland. Shot in black and white, the film focuses on the coming of age story surrounding a boy named Buddy and his family who see and interact with the conflict, which is literally occurring right outside their front door. Um, I'll just start by saying there is an edge and a realness to this movie, and it's sort of grown on me over the past few weeks. But what are your thoughts, Shane?
I agree. I agree with that sentiment. It does in some ways effectively capture that sort of chaotic setting that was Belfast at that time. I think what it really does well is the cinematography. It effectively captures the story from the child's perspective. You even see that in the camera work itself. There was one point where he was kind of standing behind dad. You can see the camera angling upward, clearly from his perspective. So the film is clearly trying to tell this story through his lens. And because you're also seeing moments of him being playful and just doing things kids, should be doing, just having fun in their own way, being mischievous by, stealing candy from the local store. Um, but the film struggles in that you also have like these intimate moments where you see him and his grandfather connecting, and then another moment that really stood out to me as pretty moving was the wife telling the husband that our roots are here essentially, and this is where we want to be. And him taking that other job in London will really just be acting in his own self-interest. um, so I think those are some moving moments, and I think in some cases they were effectively juxtaposed with that chaotic war setting. It was very inconsistent though. I didn't find myself consistently engaged because I think again, kind of like going back to West Side Story, it's kind of trying to balance these two concepts. Um, and I don't think it always works. And I think that's where the film kind of falters.
Yeah,
And also, I want to note that too that you know the storytelling could have fleshed out a little bit more in a sense that if you weren't already familiar with the Protestant Catholic conflict in Belfast, you really wouldn't know what's going on. They certainly allude to it in the film, but it's never really clearly fleshed out.
yeah. I mean, I think all very good points, Shane. We often disagree, very often disagree on movies, but I think we're largely on the same page with most of these. I agree with Belfast. Like I said, there's an edge, there's a realness to it. I've thought about it. I've thought about it since in the context of other conflicts that are going on in the world, and one place where I do think it succeeds overwhelmingly is it simultaneously makes this conflict look like really really terrible and heartbreaking, and there's literally people being killed right outside their front door. At the same time, it's also part of everyday life. There's also
Hmm.
casualness to it, which
Yep.
it was hard. I guess it didn't hit me. It had to wear over me a little bit. So I mean, I think it does that well. I mean, I also think the realness and the edge in terms of the family dynamic, which you talked about, particularly between the husband and the wife. Wife wants to stay, husband wants to go, and those conversations don't happen over a cup of tea. I mean, they're real. They're fighting with each other. And then there's some charming moments too between Buddy and the grandfather.
Hmm.
In Buddy also and his family. But I do think that there's something missing along the lines of I just it's hard to say. Obviously, the movie's about Buddy, and it takes place in during the troubles, during this religious conflict. But I honestly, I mean, I think the movie's trying to be about this religion, and this religious war is absolutely ludicrous and ridiculous, but it's
Hmm.
not really about that either. So like you said, I mean, it doesn't really set that table very well. So I
Yeah.
honestly, I mean, I could tell you all these different things about Belfast, but I couldn't tell you what it's about. Um,
Right. I think that sums it up really well.
so yeah, I mean, I missed opportunity. I mean, not a terrible movie, but I think that there could have been more done there. And so yeah,
Yeah.
that's where I come down on that, Shane. Dune, 2 hour and a 2.5 hour movie. This is the first installment in a sci-fi trilogy, I believe, right?
Hmm.
Uh,
Yep.
Starring Timothy Chalamet. It's a film uh, that depended on these large scenes, created this universe. In the distant future, a planet controlled by uh, Oscar Isaac and his son Chalamet attempt to take control of a harsh desert planet that contains a valuable commodity called spice, and everybody in this universe wants it. Obviously, a lot of obvious themes in this one, Shane.
Hmm.
But what were your sort of thoughts about this movie?
So I think this film, the cinematography was just unparalleled, unlike anything we've seen in this category. And it really kind of portrays what I can only describe as like a surreal dreamscape, kind of peppered with like these nightmarish tones. Um, and as far as its cast, I mean, it's such a great cast. They brought some real heavy hitters to this film. Timothy Chalamet, of course, Zendaya, Javier Bardem, personal favorite of mine, Oscar Isaac, who my wife will attest I probably have a man crush on.
Oh, I didn't know.
Uh, so it's just a really great cast, and
Well,
you know, what's that?
don't forget the math professor from Good Will Hunting, who plays like the major bad guy. Stellan.
Yes, yep, yep. He does, Stellan Skarsgård. Yeah, it's really really great cast. And I think they all contribute really well to this film. I think the problem with this film where it falters is it's too focused on exposition, just kind of really focused on establishing its setting, building its world, and really exploring that lore. Um, and it kind of does that at the expense of really allowing time for you to digest the characters individually. Um, but the problem here is, I think the director Denis Villeneuve, happens to be one of my personal favorite directors, love all his films. Um, I think the struggle with this is that it was necessary for him to take the time to really build this world. And if especially if this is a planned trilogy, I think this film is really sort of an investment for sort of a future reward that we're all going to reap, I think, at some point. I think it's setting itself up for something really great. um, but right now, I think it takes some commitment from the viewer, to really sort of digest its world um, and familiarize themselves with it. He could have gone the other extreme. He could have spent too much time focusing on the characters, and really that would have just left you kind of confused because you didn't really understand this world or the setting. It would probably just come across as awkward. So it was kind of a balancing act with this movie. as he tried to juggle that and keeping it to, you know, with the lore being as dense as it is. The Dune story is dense. Frank Herbert's novel is really fleshed out, and um, you know, trying to keep it just to 2.5 hours is a feat. Um, so I think that, given the material, given how he had to juggle this, the director, I think he did the best he could. I think it was a earnest first try with this trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit that it's a movie that has to age. More has to come after it to make the 2.5 hours before it,
Right.
sense and even be entertaining. I mean, I guess you could make the argument that maybe this is not a best picture nominee if it's if it's the first of a trilogy and there wasn't anything particularly remarkable about it. I will say I'll disagree with you on this, Shane. I mean, and we sort of are diametrically opposed on this generally. So this isn't the first one. I mean, I really don't need a movie to um, wow me with the action scenes. These huge, uh, loud, intricate, detailed action scenes. I certainly don't want something to look cheap or unrealistic, but some of these scenes in this movie in particular and others, it reminded me a lot of Game of Thrones, where things, action things, take place over a long period of time, and that's the scene itself more than the story is driving what's going on in the movie. So it's
Hmm.
easy for me to get lost in those scenes, and so you know, to try to be positive, of course, Chalamet, like you said, the cast is brilliant. I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
it's great. But I just there's not enough there for me. I don't know. It's almost like
Yeah.
one of these movies. I know a lot of people disagree, but one of these movies always make it in, like a Mad Max, and it's just I don't know if it's like tipping your hat to the crowd that really likes comic book movies, but they don't get in.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't see this as being different from the comic book movies that rarely get nominated.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure what happened here. Maybe it was the cast. Maybe people were really buying into that universe, but not.
Yeah, I think this really falls into a genre that, it's not for everyone. Um, just like the Marvel films aren't for everyone. So, I think there has to be sort of this sort of pre-established likeness for the sci-fi genre, specifically speaking to this movie.
Yeah, exactly. You know, um, but with all that said, I mean, I will probably watch the second one, and
Hmm.
very well could become a very again, you building that universe is an investment, right, Shane?
Yeah,
So maybe
absolutely.
the dividends will come back. So, Coda, I know a film that both of us were big fans of.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Movie, the only hearing child in a deaf family, deals with multiple challenges, including helping run the family fishing business. She's also an outcast at school. Ruby is her name. She gets involved with the choir. There's also a little high school love story in here that's sort of a little appetizer, but doesn't overwhelm the main course. This is just a good movie about family and dealing with real life.
Hmm.
And what are your thoughts here, Shane?
So I think what I really loved about this film is that it uses deafness as a platform to for creative dialogue. And I think it's the ASL, in this film really kind of elicits strong emotions from its characters because there's just a lot of opportunity for expression. Um, and I think in a way, it almost shows us how limiting verbal dialogue can be. I think you know ASL can bring just a whole new perspective to communication. And how we perceive things and how we react to things. And I think this film does that really well. Really, I think that really is central to the film story. Um, I think some of the strongest moments of the film were in silence. The family, just the arguments one on one. I think also it was very powerful when the you saw the family sitting there at the school play, and you were just in silence with them as they watched their daughter perform. I think that was a very strong moment for the film. And my personal favorite moment when her father is listening to her sing through her vocal cords. And It was a very touching, very intimate moment. And there just hasn't been anything like it. It was very unique, very fresh. Um, and you know, the pacing of this film, it's consistently engaging as it pivots back and forth between, her struggles with her family and sort of navigating the relationships and the dynamic and the family fishing business, but also her aspirations too, and working with her coach. And it just sort of, I think both aspects of that story were told really well. And I think, again, this is kind of the theme tonight, where films have to strike a balance with specific concepts. I think this film perfectly strikes that balance. um I think the my if I had to provide a criticism for this film, I would say that, the themes are familiar. You have a child who's struggling to shape their identity in a family that is just steeped in a specific set of values and traditions, and she's trying to sort of break out of that bubble, so to speak, with you know with consequences. It causes a rocky sort of road with between her and her brother, especially. You see his own sort of insecurities come out. Um, but at the end of the day, I mean, the family, it's clear that, love conquers all between this family. They do support her in the end, as she achieves her dream. So um, I think it was great. And I think the lead actress, Amelia Jones, she did excellent. That versatility with verbal expression and ASL, she was the one that really had to go back and forth with both. And she did it well.
Yeah, a couple things that you touched on that I think are really important. I mean, first off, I mean, you talk about pacing, and it almost seems like a bad word in Hollywood these days, where instead of delivering a compelling and compact story that has pacing or has rhythm, it's meant instead to mirror actual life. And I'm not sure, like, again, I think movies need to strike a balance. It's got to be real in a sense, but they also have to be something that you can take on, in a sitting, and sit there with it and understand it. And I think that the rhythm of this movie was incredible. I mean, it just went from one point to another point. It all made sense. It was all
Yep.
very fun to watch, pleasing. It's really about a dysfunctional family, a dysfunctional family that is very dysfunctional, but it overcomes in the end. It's very real. Uh,
Mhm.
there's a certain level of communication and expression that you can reach when you're using sign language. And
Yeah.
like you said, somewhat surprised. I mean, and I might be a little ignorant on the topic, but that it hasn't been explored or exploited like that in the movie before. At least one that's gotten to this level. I mean, because that does provide something. That scene between Ruby and her mother in the bedroom, they're still really trying to understand each other. After 18 years with each other,
Yeah.
they they have this very deep conversation, and there is no sound. You don't need it. You don't need it. I mean,
Hmm.
so it's a very expressive language.
Hmm.
So and add to that, which I think a lot of people may not admit, but we're all sort of suckers for performance-based movies. In terms of she's not performing all over this movie, but you hear her sing. It's pleasing. Um, you know, you hear her get better. She goes on this journey, and so I just thought this was a really good movie.
Hmm.
I know it's one that's sort of picked up steam here in the last couple of
Yeah,
weeks.
it
Potentially,
has. It really has. I think, from what I've heard, I believe it did well at some of the writers, actors guild, all those guild awards that often are predictors of what um, could win at the Oscars, as those guilds are made up of Academy members. I think we're seeing this gain momentum, and this tends to happen a lot. You have a film like Power of the Dog, which is that film that just is nominated across the board, and it's the clear front runner, top contender. But then as time goes on between when the nominations are announced and as we approach the ceremony, we have these other award ceremonies come through, and we always see a movie sort of gain momentum. um I think Parasite being a good example. Everybody was talking about 1917 being the top contender for that year, but Parasite took it out from under them. And I think that Coda could be that film. I think it has a real shot at beating Power of the Dog, and I really hope it does. This film really moved me.
yeah. I have to admit, obviously, Shane, I didn't like Power of the Dog. I think, and we could talk more about this, but I do think that this has a very good chance, and it should have a good chance. Like I said, it's one that I would easily watch again. Not something that I think we consider enough when talking about best pictures. I'm not saying that that has to be your main criteria, but I do think it should be part of the criteria. It's a movie I would happily watch again. Not sure that I would watch some of these other movies again that I
Hmm.
have a chance to win.
Yep.
With that said, we'll get back to Coda B. I think we want to put a bow on that one in terms of
Hmm.
how we both feel about it. King Richard, biographical sports drama about Richard Williams, the father of Venus and Serena Williams. It's a movie about the challenges that they face growing up in Compton. Really revolves around the plan that Richard has to make both of his daughters tennis stars. Um, I like this one. I thought this was a good movie. I think you thought the same, right, Shane?
Yes, and this was a great film. And what I think really this makes this film great is it sort of breaks the barrier of falling into that familiar sports drama slash biopic, prodigies in this case. And it really elevates itself. And in a sense that it to my surprise, because I wasn't expecting this, but and I think it's what makes this film really great is that there's such an emphasis on the socio-political themes that, and specifically with this family, an African American community, and this demographic, they're in a community that there's gangs, there's drugs, and you have this dad who is trying to do right by his kids, raise them right, as he has a community that's kind of pushing back, and a community that he can easily fall into bad habits with, but he stayed the course. And I think that these themes really play a significant role in the depth of the movie. And I think the strongest moments in this movie have absolutely nothing to do with tennis. It's really those moments where we're seeing them, try to break those barriers, confront issues of racism head on, and send that emphasize that message that the Williams sisters moving to fame and winning these championships is a huge message for diverse communities. So I think that in that aspect, the film succeeds a lot. And we're kind of what makes this film and this with this film, I kind of think like it's kind of that film that could upset Best Picture category because its themes are very relevant. We're in a time right now where there's just more of an awareness about history's social injustices, and we're really in a place where we're trying to better understand that. And I think Richard Williams, touches on that a lot. It was very impactful to when he told a story about how he owed his father owed some guy money. The guy was white. He handed him the money, but because he came into physical contact with the guy beat the crap out of him. So I think when it takes moments to really focus on those issues, I think it's telling a story that you wouldn't expect going in. And I think is a really a meaningful message of the movie.
Yeah, I think what you said about tennis. I mean, this isn't really a movie about tennis. It's not even it's a sports movie, but you don't have to be a sports fan. So this movie does very well not to get into the minutia of tennis. I'm not sure that nothing against tennis. I'm not sure there are enough people out there who care about the minutia of tennis. But what it does do is it shows this environment that the Williams sisters and Richard Williams has to navigate, which is, obviously they live in Compton, they grow up in Compton, they deal with the challenges of living in Compton, but they're also navigating the world of being an up and coming tennis star, which is a world of country clubs and these wealthy white men. And I do like the dynamic where Richard Williams is sort of simultaneously taking advantage of that world, but also like not letting that world take advantage of him.
Mhm.
So, I thought that again, this is maybe an example of a movie that's compelling enough. There's enough there. There's enough material where 2 hours and 24 minutes doesn't feel that bad. I mean,
No, yeah,
you appreciate the performances in this movie.
absolutely. I really would like to see Will Smith for an Oscar for this movie. I thought he was excellent. He showed excellent range, from anger to sadness to, humor. He danced all those emotions very effectively. I think the scene that stood out most to me was when he was dealing with the CPS worker at the house, and emphasizing, that just how hard he's working and how they are as a family, and really just kind of hammering that point home. I thought his performance in that moment was excellent.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and it's one of those scenes that you'll go back and you'll enjoy watching over and over again.
Mhm.
Because it's believable, and
Yeah,
that's what he did. I mean, we can all. I think this movie still leaves room for you to question whether or not like what he's doing in certain moments is the right thing to be doing. I mean, he
yeah, yeah,
he's obviously keeping his daughters off the streets, but I mean, he's also. I mean, sometimes at what cost?
yes.
In the movie doesn't explore that explicitly, but it's there. I mean,
Mhm. Well, I think at one moment I think it does, and I think that's when John Bernthal's character addresses him, and calls him out and says, basically saying that, delivering that message and saying to him, like essentially more or less, who is this about? You or your daughters? And I think that does give him pause. And I think I believe it was shortly after that there was the argument between him, Richard, and his wife, which I thought was a very powerful moment. Um, I think that because she basically called him out that he doesn't want to be seen as a failure, especially in the context of his ethnicity. And she just outright acknowledges that to him. And he you can see at that moment that there was kind of a bit of a breakthrough.
how about the tube sock collection in this movie, Shane? I mean, I know
The what?
sweatshirt and tube socks all over this movie. I mean, Richard Williams' wardrobe was phenomenal. I mean,
Yeah, right.
no, you
Yes.
the man who has a phenomenal and an extensive sweater collection.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that.
So no,
Great costume design.
I think a very good movie, and I think, like you said, perhaps it's in the mix for Best Picture. I think what'll end up happening is that Will Smith will win Best Actor, and then that'll be how the movie's recognized. And I think that, in fact,
Mhm.
the Academy works best when it works that way. So
Yes. Yep.
let's
Yeah,
move.
I mean, and I think that's you make a good point. I think it's a great way to acknowledge the film because he drove the film. He drove this movie.
Um, let's get back to that, Shane, because I think that's worth sort of here shortly at the end to sort of tie everything together.
Mhm.
Nightmare Alley, neo noir, psychological drama starring Bradley Cooper and Kate Blanchett. Cooper plays a carny working his way up from a low level carnival worker position. Guillermo del Toro film. He directed The Shape of Water. Where are you on this one, Shane?
Uh, this film just felt unremarkable to me. Um, you know, the story kind of really suffers from an identity crisis. It kind of pivots between a depiction of carnival culture, then you have the con artist duo, Bradley Cooper and his girlfriend, and their exploits, and then the dynamic of Bradley Cooper and the psychiatrist. Um, and it ends up, for a good portion of the movie, the story gets very muddled. It really, you really don't have a clear sense of what we're supposed to be focusing on and what type of outcome we're looking for here. Um, I think the ending of the film cleverly ties it back to the beginning, um, where Bradley Cooper is sort of uh, kind of falls into that trope that he witnessed in the beginning, where there was this, probably homeless guy that was drugged and used as sort of like theater for the carnival audience. And he ends up, and the implication of the ending is that he's going to end up in that role as well. So I thought that aspect of it was clever, but essentially you didn't need a huge part of the film to be able to tell that story, because you had, like I said, you had these different dynamics going on, and none of it really made it clear as to where it was going. Then on all it really did at the end was tie it back to a concept that was introduced in the very beginning of the movie. So you could have watched the beginning segment and then have sort of jumped to the end, the last 20 minutes or so, and you would have, understood, the what was happening there in terms of that cycle.
Let me ask.
Um,
Let me ask you this, Shane, because I unfortunately didn't get to this one. Is this one have a shot at all? You say you call it
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think it's like I said, there's nothing that really thematically stands out to me. Um, where this film's strong points are in its cinematography and its art design. It's Guillermo del Toro, so you're going to get a beautiful set. He has a very surrealist artistic aesthetic. His films can be dark, but there's something also endearing about his overall tone. And I think his depiction of the carnival culture was just gorgeous, very beautiful, beautifully shot. Um, but the material, the script that he had to work with, the source material wasn't his. This is based on I can't remember if it was a short story or novel, but that wasn't his. And that was what was unremarkable here, was really the story. It was told in a beautiful world, but just was unremarkable.
Um, let's put a pin in that one, Shane, and let's move on to Drive My Car.
Okay.
Drama directed by Hamaguchi. Hopefully, I've said the last name correctly there. A 3-hour film uh,
Hmm.
covering the life of a Japanese actor who discovers his wife having an affair with a young actor. He avoids confronting her for her only to die suddenly of a brain hemorrhage. Um, on its face, this looks like a very compelling script or plot, but I know, Shane, that you had trouble with the sort of pace of this one.
Yes. At a 3 hour runtime, again, it falls into that category of a film that's just way too overindulgent on its, sort of artistic expression and what it's trying to go for. Um, it's an abstract depiction of a man who is trying to cope with the challenges that he's faced in his life. And it's clear from pretty much the get-go that he uses theater to cope with his emotions. And the play that's being rehearsed throughout the film is sort of a metaphor for that, and it's clear that that's what the themes are here. The length of time that's spent on sort of this rehearsal of the play and really hammering home that this metaphor, way too extraneous. So many of these scenes could have been cut. It's completely unnecessary. Not to say the film didn't have some strong moments. I think there was some great conversation between his driver and him. And it was some very meaningful conversation. Just regarding their outlook on life, and just sort of their own and his driver's own challenges too, and how they're almost connected in some way, and they almost parallel each other in some aspects. But you just can't help but feel exhausted after watching this movie, because I think it's one of those films where the director truly tries to lean into that abstract art of storytelling with using the play and using his theater love of theater as a metaphor, and it indulges way too much in that. And my thinking is with this film is, because the director really took this sort of abstract artistic approach, that's why we're seeing it as a nominee, because it just really is trying to do something bold. But it's really just it's the depiction of it. It just feels gratuitous at times.
Was this the toughest one for you to get through, Shane?
What?
The toughest one was this sort of?
Yes, by and large, absolutely. And I think a great comparison is the Godfather films. They're some of my all-time favorites, as you know. 3.5 hours long. These movies. And they're some of the best stories ever told, because the material was there. The world was fleshed out. It really gives you a window into Italian culture. It really you really takes the time to establish interesting characters, and it creates this overarching plot too, of this family as trying to consolidate their power. And so there's a lot of meat to those stories, and then those are justifiably long. This film, there just doesn't have that sort of depth and sort of, as I said, meat of to go off of to really tell a 3 hour story. This was a film that could have probably been told effectively in an hour and a half to 2 hour mark.
Probably not a perfect comparison, but it reminds me a little bit of Scorsese's film a few years ago with De Niro and Pesci.
Absolutely, The Irishman. I think that's a perfect example.
Where it's just like the movie, like you almost feel like these directors go in saying like, this has to be a 3.5 hour epic,
Yeah.
Or having the epic.
Yeah. And I remember we covered this, in our prior video, and it just kind of like in that film, it was like Scorsese was spending all this time introducing all these different characters, and most of them didn't even matter by the end of the movie, because it honed in on Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, and that was it.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like watching the first half of the movie was taking a quiz.
Yeah.
Like you were gonna have to remember all these people. So I mean, I think it's a terrible trend in Hollywood. I mean, obviously the
It
movie
is.
first, and then whether or not you need to make it an enormous length, I think comes later.
Mm-hmm.
So Anyway, again, full disclosure, I did not watch that one, but that's why Shane's here. Shane,
I spared you the pain for this one.
thank you, Shane, for laying on that sword for all of us. How about I do see a fair amount of interaction on our Facebook feed. We're live on Facebook right now. Thank you all for joining us. Did anybody else watch this one? 3 hours. It's on HBO Max right now. Be curious to see if anyone other than Shane and his poor wife, who watches all of these movies with him, had to watch. All right, let's move on to the final movie, Licorice Pizza, coming of age comedy drama written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, starring a couple of newcomers as well as
Yep.
and Sean Penn. What were your thoughts here, Shane?
So yeah, I think this film, I really like this movie. I think I really liked, one thing I have to point out is just the sharp editing. You had moments that really sort of quickly cut to dramatic moments. There's a part where the lead character, Gary, who's played by Philip Seymour Hoffman's son, is grabbed by police while he's at setting up a stand. And just the impact of that editing just really kind of gave it sort of the weight of that moment, really emphasized the weight of that moment. And just like even just the way characters like flip open doors and things like that, it's just the way that that's edited and shot it's really well done and really kind of packs a punch. The cinematography and the set design I think were excellent. They effectively portray that 70s aesthetic, and it's a great 70s soundtrack. It's sort of loud on purpose, gives it a personality all on its own. And it does, it really does enhance the sequences between the two leads, Gary and Alana. The whole film is really about the director playfully titillating the viewer about Gary and Alana's relationship. She's a lot older than he is. He's a teen and she's 25 or something. And this relationship, it's not quite intimate. They're emotionally intimate, but then there's this kind of like push-pull effect going on that we're not really the intimacy isn't fully realized until the very end of the movie, and which does feel rewarding. And that was the director's clear intention all the entire time, was to sort of tease the viewer and to wanting to see these two just cross that physical barrier and have intimacy. So at the very end of the film, they shared a kiss. She expressed her love for him, and that was more or less how the story wrapped up. My critique of this movie, really the storytelling, the other characters of the movie, they're there just in service of Gary and Alana. This is just a story about the two of them. So the movie is very narrowly focused in that aspect. But that's, for me, it's a mild criticism. I thought this was a great movie, well told. I don't think it quite reaches the heights of Best Picture, because there are just tones to this film that, in terms of its romance and its humor, that it's somewhat familiar. It feels familiar, where you just want to see the two leads finally get together. That's a common theme for many, romantic. I would call this more of a romantic dramedy, not simply a romantic comedy. And I think it's a theme that's been explored before, so that's why that's what I think holds it back from being an actual Best Picture nominee, or Best Picture win, I should say.
All right, so let's get very serious here for a second, and let's talk Turkey. Let's get down to it. I think you've really kind of showed your cards already, Shane. But how about let's do it this way? What were your from your third favorite to your first favorite? Give me your top three. Start.
So number 3, I think, is King Richard for me. I really liked this movie. I think it's that film, like I said, could create a bit of an upset with the two that they are forecasted to run right now, Coda and Power of the Dog. Um, so I would like to see this film win. And I could see it winning on the premise of its relevant themes. We've seen that happen before. Um, you know, in some cases, I think we can both agree that those relevant socio-political themes and a film winning on those merits isn't always a good thing. But I think this film does that, but still tells a good story, still has characters that are meaningful. So I think in a way does deserve a win. But I think you made a excellent point that I hadn't thought of before. Giving Will Smith that Best Actor nod could go as far as acknowledging the film as a whole, because he was the core of that movie. He drove that movie.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I tend to think that, like I said before, I think the Academy works best where when they try to acknowledge these films in some way and sort of split the awards. I do think that Will Smith will win for Best Actor. Um, where I think it doesn't work is the fact that as much as my favorite movie here is, if you didn't already sort of figure that out, it's Coda. It's a great movie.
yeah.
Wait to watch it again. There's a lot of heart in it. Like Shane said, the use of sign language and just the potential for expression there is incredible. So it's my favorite movie, followed not far after that by King Richard, which again, very good, compelling, good story, good pacing, just a good movie. And then Belfast, my third favorite movie here, which, like I said, has aged on me. What I'm worried about here, Shane, and I'm ready to make a prediction. What I'm worried about is that Coda will get acknowledged, and it'll get acknowledged in a very worthy way, in the sense that the father, nominated for Best Supporting Actor, will win that. Hands
Mhm.
will win that. And I fear and will predict that Power of the Dog will, in fact, win on Sunday night and beat out Coda. Uh, Benedict Cumberbatch, I think, is somebody that the Academy would like to award and consider for Best Actor, but I
Mhm.
think that Will Smith will get it here, and Power of the Dog will get recognized with the top prize.
Yeah, I really feel like at this point there is an even split between those two movies. It feels like a toss up to me between Power of the Dog and Coda. I could see either one winning. I'd love for Coda to win too. That was the film that moved me the most. Again, because if it's just fresh take on creative expression and dialogue, I loved every minute of that. Power of the Dog. I know we agreed less on this movie, but I really did like it. I liked the subtle implied moments. I liked the minimalist soundtrack that really emphasized the suspense. I loved the cinematography and the acting from all the actors. Benedict, of course, but also Kirsten Dunst playing a drunken wife, Jesse Plemons. You know, um, I think there was a lot of great performances here. So, um, it's hard to say. I really think it at least boils down to those two. And I guess we'll see what happens.
Let me ask you at least one more question here. And
Mhm.
what's next for you? What's next for Revamp? Um, this is very
Well,
interesting, Shane. I mean, we started talking.
yeah.
I think I think we can definitely talk some more about it.
This is an unpredictable industry. It's hard to say. I'm always you know ready to go for new projects. My cousin has, I think, a few in the works. He's got tons of photo shoots right now. There are only some specific areas that I'm willing to sort of talk about. And in terms of covering for a specific interview or feature. Um, and he has a good sense of what that will be. So there's really nothing on deck right now, only because I just got off the heels of submitting this interview with Ryan McParland, who is a star on the Halo TV series. So really great guy. You know, it was really nice to sit down and have a Zoom with him. Very warm, very engaging. So definitely check out that interview if you haven't already. You know, it's he has a lot of great stuff to say, not just about the show, but about just his perspective on, you know, acting and his passion. Um,
I feel like Shane, and you're coming to us live from your home in upstate New York. I feel like maybe next year, you know, maybe you're in California and Hollywood.
let's not go that far, Nick. We'll see what happens, you know.
No, it's really exciting what you're doing and what Revamp is doing, and I think I can speak for both of us that we're excited and thrilled that that Revamp is likely going to share our videos. So
Yes, yep, that will happen. That is, um, you know, that is a sure thing. So we will be up and running on Revamp probably sometime later tomorrow, Saturday. So anyone who hasn't been able to catch our video will have a chance to over the weekend prior to the big night.
well, thank you so much for watching us tonight. We are the unparalleled Oscar Duo. We have to work on that name, Shane. It's getting hard for me to say. Unparalleled Oscar Duo.
Oh, there's no going back. We've established the name. The trademark is there.
We're a thing. We're a thing.
The nail is in the coffin, Nick.
Exactly. So thank you for watching, and thank you, Revamp. Everybody, have a fantastic evening.
Thank you, guys. Take it easy.